10-year-old boy battling terminal cancer faces his final days. His parents, consumed with grief, struggle to find peace amidst the pain. A mysterious stray dog appears at the hospital, offering comfort in ways no one can explain. As the boy says his final goodbye, the dog's presence becomes an unspoken miracle, leaving an indelible mark on all who meet him. Robin was only 10 years old. His body had already grown frail and no longer resembled the vibrant boy he used to be. The diagnosis had come nearly a year ago. Terminal cancer, a rare and aggressive form that even the best doctors struggled to treat. Since then, his life had been defined by hospital visits, endless medications, and a longing for normalcy. His once lively face, filled with laughter and energy, had grown thinner. His cheeks were sharp, and his tired eyes had lost the spark of youthful curiosity. Mark and Rose sat by his side each day, holding his hand and giving all the love they could. Their early hope for a miracle had faded into quiet acceptance. Each day felt like a gift, shadowed by the fear it might be their last with him. Mark grew quiet, his voice trembling, while Rose tried to stay brave despite the worry on her face. They clung to hope, but Robin was slipping away. The hospital where Robin spent most of his time felt like a place of both hope and despair. The sterile white walls and the smell of antiseptic were at odds with the gentle attempts of the medical staff to make Robin stay as comfortable as possible. Nurses would enter his room with bright smiles, making small talk to lift his spirits, but their eyes were full of sympathy that Robin, ever perceptive, noticed. The doctors would offer words of encouragement, but Robin could sense that their optimism was no longer rooted in any real expectation of recovery. They weren't fooling anyone. Despite this, Robin's parents tried their best to create warmth in the cold environment. They brought in his favorite toys, his beloved stuffed animals, and pictures from home. Rose would read to him every night, often from books they'd enjoyed together before the illness took hold. Mark would play games with him when he could muster the energy. Even in the face of it all, they tried to hold on to the small joys they could still share. But the room, no matter how lovingly arranged, was still a reminder of Robin's fragile state. The soft hum of the hospital machines, the beeping of monitors, and the muffled conversations of passing doctors and nurses all seemed to blur into a steady background noise, a constant reminder that time was running out. Robin had always been a strong, quiet boy, never one to openly express his fears. He had learned to accept the pain of his illness without complaining, a trait that both impressed and broke his parents' hearts. In his eyes, there was a weariness that didn't belong to a child his age, but he never let it show in front of them. When his mother or father would ask him how he was feeling, he would smile and say, "I'm okay," even when the pain made it difficult to breathe. He wanted to protect them from his suffering, to reassure them that he wasn't scared, though deep down he was. He feared leaving them, of course. Robin had no real concept of what lay beyond this life, but he knew enough to understand that death meant separation, and the thought of his parents having to live without him was a heavy burden he couldn't quite carry. But there was also an unspoken strength in him, a quiet resolve to face whatever was coming with dignity, just as he had faced every day in the hospital without complaint. He had grown tired of fighting, but not of loving his parents. The hospital room felt both suffocating and oddly comforting, as if it was a space suspended between life and death. The doctors and nurses did their best to maintain the facade of hope, but everyone knew what was coming. And Robin, brave, quiet Robin, was beginning to understand that too. Each day that passed was another step closer to goodbye, and although he tried to be strong, the weight of it all was becoming harder to bear. In those quiet moments when his parents left for a brief respite, or when the room grew still in the late hours of the night, Robin would think about what he wanted to say to them. He didn't know how to say goodbye, not with words, not with anything. So he kept it to himself, only hoping that somehow they would understand. But as the days grew shorter, he knew one thing for certain. His love for them was something that would never fade, no matter how far apart they would one day be. It was a gray, overcast afternoon when the stray dog first appeared. The doors to the pediatric ward were meant to be secure, yet somehow the scruffy creature had made its way inside. The dog, its fur matted and worn, wandered through the sterile hallways of the hospital with the quiet grace of one who had been through many battles. Its eyes, though tired, held a spark of something unexplainable, something otherworldly. No one knew where the dog had come from, but it made its way toward Robin's room with a singular purpose. It wasn't the first time the hospital had seen strays, but something about this one was different. The dog didn't bark or cause any commotion. Instead, it moved silently, its paws padding softly on the polished floors. The nurses, initially caught off guard, didn't know what to do. It wasn't a service dog, and hospital rules prohibited animals in patient rooms. But no one seemed to have the heart to remove the dog, not when it was so clearly drawn to Robin's room. Inside, Robin lay in his bed, his body weak from the relentless progression of his illness. His parents had stepped out for a brief moment to catch a breath in the hallway, and in the stillness of the room, Robin's eyes were half closed, his energy drained. That's when the dog entered. Without hesitation, the dog approached Robin's bed, its tail wagging ever so slightly. Robin, who had been staring out the window, turned his head. At first, he seemed unsure, his brow furrowed with a mix of curiosity and exhaustion. But something shifted when their eyes met. The dog didn't bark or whine. It simply sat down at the foot of the bed, gazing up at Robin with an unspoken understanding. Robin's heart skipped a beat, the tightness in his chest loosening just a little. It was as though the dog had entered his life for a reason, as though it had come to offer something that words could not. Comfort. The kind of comfort only a creature who didn't need to speak could give. Robin slowly reached out, and the dog nudged his hand gently with its nose. It was as if they had known each other forever, though they had only just met. At that moment, Robin's weariness seemed to ease, and for the first time in days, a small smile tugged at his lips. He felt a connection to the dog that was beyond explanation. It was a simple, quiet bond, one that filled the room with a warmth Robin hadn't felt in a long time. His heart, though heavy with illness, began to feel a flicker of light. The nurses, witnessing the scene from the doorway, exchanged puzzled glances. They had never seen this dog before, nor did they know how it had entered the building. But there was something calming about the way it sat by Robin's side, something that made them hesitate to disturb the moment. The staff continued to watch, unsure of what to do, but instinctively aware that Robin was at peace for the first time in a while. When Mark and Rose returned to the room, they were taken aback by the sight of the dog. They had never seen it before, and it seemed to appear out of nowhere. But as they watched Robin pet the dog's rough fur, something inside them stirred. Robin was smiling. He looked lighter, less burdened by the weight of his illness. It was as if the dog had somehow brought a shift in the energy of the room.
Where did this dog come from?
Rose asked, her voice soft.
I don't know.
Mark replied, a puzzled frown on his face.
But look at him. Robin's never smiled like that in days.
The dog remained still at Robin's feet, watching over him with an unwavering presence. It didn't ask for attention, nor did it seem to need anything in return. It simply stayed, its head slightly tilted as if understanding that Robin needed it here, now, in this moment. The family exchanged hesitant looks but said nothing more. They decided to allow the dog to remain, unsure of the rules, but certain that something was happening, a connection between Robin and the stray that no one could explain. Over the next few days, the dog, whom Robin had decided to name Hero, became a fixture in the room. Hero's calming presence seemed to fill the space in a way no human could. When Robin became restless or anxious, Hero would gently nudge him, as though assuring him that everything was going to be okay. The dog never left Robin's side, not even when the nurses came in to check on him or when the staff did their rounds. Robin began to look forward to the dog's visits, even though he knew the staff would likely ask about its origins. He didn't care. When Hero was around, he felt a sense of peace, something he hadn't felt in a long time. There was no fear in Hero's eyes, no pity or sympathy. It was simply there to offer comfort, as if it understood the depths of Robin's suffering. Mark and Rose, still unsure of the dog's mysterious arrival, couldn't deny the change they saw in their son. Robin smiled more, laughed quietly at small things, and seemed less consumed by his illness. It was as if the weight of the world had been momentarily lifted from his shoulders. Though they still wondered about the dog's origins, they couldn't help but feel a renewed sense of hope. Hope that, maybe, Just maybe, Robin wasn't alone in this fight. And in the presence of Hero, that hope grew a little brighter. Hero's influence spread quickly beyond Robin's room. It wasn't long before the dog began visiting other children in the pediatric ward, seemingly drawn to those who needed comfort the most. His quiet presence became a source of peace for many who were struggling with their own fears, pain, and uncertainty. Hero would move from one room to the next, never rushing, always sensing where his comfort was needed. He wasn't just a dog, he was something more, something that offered the kind of solace no human could. One of the first children to feel Hero's calming effect was Andy, a 6-year-old girl with a heart condition. She had been terrified of the constant medical procedures, her small body trembling with anxiety at the sight of doctors or nurses. One afternoon as she lay in bed, her fear mounting once again, Hero appeared at her side. The little dog gently nudged her hand and, for the first time in weeks, Andy didn't flinch. Instead, she smiled. A small, tentative smile, but a smile nonetheless. From that moment on, whenever Hero entered her room, Andy's fear seemed to dissolve, replaced by a quiet trust that made even the hardest days more bearable. Hero's reach didn't stop with Andy. He visited other children too, each one drawn to him as if he were a magnet for their pain and distress. There was Jake, a 9-year-old boy undergoing chemotherapy, who had spent most of his days withdrawn, unable to find the energy to speak. But one morning, Hero sat at the foot of his bed, his head tilted in quiet understanding. Slowly, Jake reached out to pet him, and in that moment, something shifted. The boy began to talk, telling Hero about his favorite cartoons and the things he dreamed about. It wasn't a miracle cure, but it was a miracle in its own way, an opening of a door that had been closed for so long. As Hero moved through the ward, the staff began to notice something strange. Nurse Sadie, who had been working at the hospital for years, had seen her fair share of medical cases, both hopeful and hopeless. But there was something about Hero that was undeniably different. She began to notice a pattern. Children who had been too frightened to speak, too ill to smile, were suddenly interacting with Hero. They were laughing, talking, and, most importantly, finding peace. Children who had been too weak to sit up were now sitting up, playing games with Hero, or simply enjoying the quiet companionship the dog offered. At first, Sadie kept her observations to herself, unsure if anyone would believe the strange phenomenon unfolding before her. But as more and more children began to show signs of improvement, or at least a sense of calm, she couldn't ignore the impact Hero was having. She started to share her thoughts with her fellow nurses, who were equally intrigued. Some of them were skeptical, chalking it up to coincidence. But others couldn't deny the effect the dog seemed to have on the children. There was no scientific explanation for it, but the results were clear. Hero was making a difference. It wasn't just the children who noticed, the doctors did too. Dr. Parker, a seasoned pediatrician, was initially skeptical about the dog's presence in the ward, especially since no one could explain where he had come from or why he was so intent on visiting the children. But over time, even he couldn't ignore the improvements he saw in his patients. He had a particularly tough case in Megan, a 7-year-old girl battling leukemia. Megan had been withdrawn and refused to eat or speak for days. Her condition was deteriorating, and her parents were beside themselves with worry. Then Hero appeared in her room. He didn't do anything extraordinary. He simply sat by her side, offering his silent presence. Slowly, Megan began to eat again. Her parents watched in amazement as she started to talk, asking questions, telling Hero about her favorite dolls. The doctors could offer no explanation, but the transformation was undeniable. Megan wasn't cured, but the change in her emotional state was enough to lift the spirits of everyone around her. For Robin, Hero's presence was a source of quiet strength. While the other children found peace through Hero's visits, Robin found something deeper, a sense of acceptance. Before Hero's arrival, Robin had been consumed by his illness, constantly battling the fear of what was to come. He had tried to remain brave for his parents, but there was always a quiet, gnawing dread in his heart. But with Hero by his side, Robin's emotional state began to shift. His bond with the dog grew stronger with each passing day. Robin started to embrace his final days with a new sense of peace. He no longer fought the inevitable. Instead, he learned to accept it. Hero became a symbol of comfort, not just for Robin, but for his parents as well. Mark and Rose, who had been struggling to come to terms with their son's illness, found strength in the quiet moments they shared with Hero. The dog's presence reminded them that there was still love, still connection, even in the face of loss. As the days passed, Robin's demeanor changed. He was no longer angry or fearful. He still had moments of sadness, of course, but the heavy weight of dread seemed to lift. Hero, without words, had helped him understand that it was okay to let go. The dog didn't promise a miracle. He didn't offer any grand speeches or assurances, but his presence, unwavering and gentle, gave Robin and his family a sense of peace that they hadn't known before. Robin's emotional growth was subtle, but powerful. He began to ask questions about life, about what it meant to be brave, and what it would be like to say goodbye. Hero would sit by his side, silently offering his comfort. In those moments, Robin realized that bravery wasn't about fighting until the end. It was about accepting the journey and finding peace along the way. Hero had done more than comfort the children in the hospital. He had given them and their families a gift that no medicine or treatment could provide, the gift of peace in the face of uncertainty. And for Robin, that gift meant more than words could express. As Robin's condition continued to deteriorate, his parents could feel the heaviness of each passing day. His once bright eyes were now dull, his small body weak and frail. But even in the face of his terminal illness, Robin remained resolute in his desire to leave a lasting impact on his family, one that wasn't defined by sadness, but by love and strength. One evening when Mark and Rose were sitting by Robin's bedside, Robin stirred, his voice barely above a whisper. He had been quiet for days, his energy depleted by the toll of his illness. But today he had something important to say. Mark leaned in closer, his hand resting gently on Robin's, as the boy took a deep breath before speaking.
I don't want you to be sad when I'm gone, Dad, or you, Mom. I want you to remember me as strong, brave, like Hero.
His words were slow, each one carefully chosen, as though he were summing up everything he hoped for in his final moments. Rose wiped away a tear, her heart breaking at the weight of her son's words. Mark squeezed his hand, a lump in his throat making it hard to speak. Robin continued, his voice barely a whisper.
I love you both so much, and I want you to celebrate my life, not just mourn it.
Tears welled in Mark's eyes as he looked at his son, his heart both shattered and full. Robin, despite the ravages of his illness, was still thinking of his family, still caring for them even as he faced his own end. It was a quiet, bittersweet moment of profound love that would stay with them forever. Robin smiled faintly, the exhaustion overwhelming him, and drifted back into a peaceful sleep. In the days that followed, Robin grew weaker. His small body seemed to be losing the battle, but his spirit remained strong, as if defying the inevitable. Mark and Rose spent every moment with him, holding him close, cherishing the quiet moments together. They had talked about Robin's wishes, but neither of them knew just how deeply he had thought about his final moments. Until, unexpectedly, Hero played a crucial role in revealing it. One afternoon, as the room felt particularly heavy with the silence of impending loss, Hero entered the room again. The dog had been by Robin's side throughout the entire journey, but today he seemed more insistent than ever. Hero sat quietly by Robin's bed, his eyes fixed on Mark with an unusual intensity, almost as if urging him to notice something. Mark, who had grown accustomed to Hero's comforting presence, felt an unspoken pull to follow the dog's gaze. Hero, without a word, slowly moved toward Robin's bedside, then to the corner of the room where the bed frame met the wall. Curious, Mark rose from his chair and approached. Hero, with a soft whine, nudged at the bed, pushing slightly at the edge of the mattress. Mark hesitated for a moment before he began to lift the bedspread, and there, tucked carefully underneath, he found it, a small, folded piece of paper. Mark's heart skipped a beat as he recognized the handwriting. Robin had written a letter. He sat back down beside Robin's bed, holding the letter in his trembling hands. Rose, who had been watching from across the room, joined him. Together they unfolded the paper, each word a testament to Robin's maturity and clarity, a reflection of his strength in the face of death. The letter read,
Mom, Dad, I know you're both scared and sad, and I know you don't want to let me go. But please remember that I'm okay. I'm not scared anymore. I'm not in pain anymore. I'm happy. I'm going to be okay. I want you to be proud of me. You've always told me to be brave, to be strong, and I've tried so hard to do that for you. So when I go, please don't cry for me. I want you to celebrate my life. Remember all the good things, all the happy moments. Remember how much I love you and how you've made me who I am. I will always be with you in your hearts. I love you forever, Robin.
Mark and Rose sat there, their hearts swelling with a combination of pride and heartbreak. Robin had written this letter with a maturity that belied his years, understanding something that even many adults couldn't grasp, that the end of life wasn't just a moment of loss, but a part of the greater journey. And that love, while it couldn't stop the pain of separation, could help heal the wounds left behind. Tears streamed down their faces as they read the letter aloud to each other, each word a comfort and a goodbye wrapped in one. They looked over at Robin, who lay sleeping peacefully, and felt a renewed sense of purpose. This was their last chance to show him how proud they were, how deeply they loved him, and how much they would carry his memory with them forever. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Mark and Rose sat quietly at Robin's side. They talked to him, reminiscing about the moments they had shared as a family. They told him how proud they were of his strength, his courage, and his unwavering love. Robin, still weak, managed a faint smile, the joy of their words filling his heart in his final hours. As the evening wore on, Robin drifted into a peaceful sleep. The room was quiet, the only sound the gentle ticking of the clock on the wall. Hero lay at the foot of the bed, his presence a constant comfort, just as it had been throughout Robin's journey. And then in the early hours of the morning, Robin passed away in his sleep. There were no loud gasps, no frantic moments of fear. It was as if he had simply slipped away, leaving behind a legacy of love, bravery, and peace. Mark and Rose held him close, their hearts breaking, but also filled with a profound sense of peace. They had done everything they could for Robin, and they had given him everything they had. And now, in his final moments, Robin had given them something they hadn't expected. Peace, the knowledge that they had done right by him, and that he had faced his death with grace and strength. Hero remained by Robin's side until the very end. When Mark and Rose looked down at their son's peaceful face, they saw not just the child they had loved, but the brave young soul he had become. And as they whispered their final goodbyes, they knew that Robin's love would always be with them, just as he had promised. The room was still, but in the silence, there was no sorrow. Only the sense that Robin had left behind a beautiful legacy, one that would live on in the hearts of those who had known him. And Hero, ever faithful, stayed by their side, a symbol of the love and peace that had filled their lives in Robin's final days. As the first light of morning filtered softly through the hospital room, Robin's family sat in stunned silence, holding on to the quiet peace that had settled after his passing. Mark and Rose clung to each other, their hearts broken but filled with gratitude for the time they had with their son. Hero, ever faithful, remained at the foot of Robin's bed, a silent sentinel. But when they looked up from their grief, something was different. Hero was gone. It wasn't an immediate realization. At first, Mark thought he had simply missed seeing the dog in the room. But as the minutes passed, the absence of Hero began to feel palpable, like a part of the room had vanished. He glanced around, checking the corners. The door. There was no sign of the dog anywhere. It was as though Hero had slipped away in the stillness, quietly vanishing without a trace. No one had heard him leave. No one had seen him go. The hospital staff, already dealing with their own sadness at Robin's passing, now found themselves baffled by the mysterious departure of the dog who had become so integral to the ward. Nurse Sadie was the first to mention it. She had been with the family throughout Robin's final days, and though she had grown fond of Hero, it wasn't until he disappeared that she began to reflect on the dog's true impact. She paused for a moment in the hallway, watching as the staff went about their usual tasks, but something inside her stirred. She had witnessed firsthand the transformation that Hero had brought to the children, and the sense of calm he had brought to even the most difficult of situations.
How strange.
Sadie murmured to a fellow nurse.
He's just gone, like he was never here.
The other nurse nodded, still in awe of Hero's presence.
Do you think maybe he was some kind of angel?
Some of the staff had joked about it, but as Sadie and the others looked back on the weeks that had passed, they couldn't help but wonder. Hero had arrived without explanation, offering comfort and healing to children who had no other way of finding peace. His unspoken presence seemed to do what words could not, lifting spirits, easing fears, and even offering hope when it felt like there was none left. His calm demeanor had been a balm for both the children and the adults, and now in the wake of Robin's passing, it seemed as though Hero's work was done.
He was more than just a dog, wasn't he?
Nurse Sadie said softly, her voice tinged with reverence.
It's like he knew exactly what each of those children needed. He was here for a reason.
Other staff members who had witnessed the changes in the children spoke up, each sharing a story of how Hero had quietly worked his magic. One nurse recalled how a young girl, terrified of needles, had suddenly found the courage to face her treatment after a brief interaction with Hero. Another doctor spoke of a boy who had been too weak to speak, but after spending time with the dog, he had opened up, even managing to ask about his future. There was no explanation, no science to back it up, but the evidence was clear. Hero had made a difference. For Mark and Rose, Hero's departure was a bittersweet moment in their grieving process. They had come to rely on the dog's presence, especially in Robin's final days. Hero had provided comfort in ways that no one else could, sitting quietly by Robin's side, offering companionship, and helping to guide their son to a place of peace. His departure, while peaceful and natural, left them feeling a strange sense of finality. It was as if Hero had been Robin's guardian until the very end, and now with Robin gone, it was as though the dog had fulfilled his purpose.
I'm glad we had him.
Mark said quietly, his voice thick with emotion.
I don't know how we would have gotten through those days without him.
Rose nodded, wiping her eyes.
He was more than just a dog. He was something special, something we'll never forget.
Though they mourned Robin's loss, they also felt a deep sense of gratitude for the time Hero had spent with them. His quiet presence had helped to ease their fears and had made Robin's final days more bearable. They couldn't help but feel that the dog had been sent to them at exactly the right moment, as if he had been chosen to help guide them through the hardest part of their lives. In the days that followed, word of Hero's disappearance spread through the hospital. Some staff members were left puzzled, trying to piece together where the dog had come from and why he had left so suddenly. Yet no one could answer those questions. Hero had never been registered, never claimed as a pet by any of the staff or patients. He seemed to have appeared out of nowhere, only to vanish once his purpose had been fulfilled. Still, as they reflected on his time at the hospital, a sense of awe lingered. Hero had left behind a legacy, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there could be light. His presence had been a source of comfort for the children, the parents, and the staff. It wasn't just the physical comfort of a dog lying by a bedside. It was something deeper, something spiritual. Hero had reminded them of the power of compassion, of the healing that could come from simply being present with someone in their most vulnerable moments. For Mark and Rose, the memories of Hero's presence would remain with them forever. They knew that their son's journey had been made easier by the dog's companionship, and they took comfort in the thought that Hero had been there when they needed him most. And so, as the hospital continued to heal, the staff and the family carried with them the memory of the dog who had touched their lives in ways they couldn't fully explain. Some called him a guardian angel, others a magical presence. But for Mark, Rose, and all the children Hero had comforted, he would always be a symbol of love, peace, and the unspoken bond that can exist between souls. In the months following Robin's passing, Mark and Rose found themselves navigating an overwhelming mix of grief and gratitude. The loss of their son weighed heavily on their hearts, but the memory of his final days, peaceful and full of love, gave them strength to carry on. Hero, the stray dog who had come into their lives at the most critical moment, had played an essential role in helping them heal. He had not only been a comfort to Robin, but also to them, guiding them through the painful journey of saying goodbye. As the weeks passed, the family struggled with the emptiness Robin's absence had left in their home. The house felt quieter without his laughter, without his small footsteps running through the hallways. Yet they also began to sense that a new chapter was quietly starting to unfold, one where healing could begin. One afternoon, Rose and Mark took a walk together to the local animal shelter. It was a decision they had been contemplating for weeks. Robin had always loved animals, and the idea of adopting another dog seemed like a fitting tribute to the one who had brought them so much comfort in their time of need. The shelter, though small, had a variety of dogs, each waiting for a family to call them their own. After hours of looking, they came across a small, scruffy dog with kind eyes that reminded them so much of Hero. The dog, too, was a stray, rescued from the streets. He had a soft, patchy coat and an unassuming demeanor. But when Mark knelt down to offer his hand, the dog immediately stepped forward, as if recognizing something deep within him. It was in that moment that Rose whispered,
This is him, Mark. This is Hero.
and so, in honor of the dog who had been with them during Robin's final days, they adopted the little shelter dog and gave him the name Hero. The gesture was symbolic, a way for them to continue the healing journey that Hero had helped them start, a way to keep Robin's memory alive in a world that, though still full of sorrow, was also beginning to heal. As the days turned into weeks, Hero, the shelter dog, quickly found his place in their home. His quiet presence was a balm for their aching hearts. Though he couldn't replace Robin, he brought new joy into their lives, helping them cope with the pain by offering comfort, love, and the same calming presence they had once found in the mysterious stray dog at the hospital. In the meantime, word of Hero's impact spread throughout the hospital, the local community, and beyond. The staff who had watched as the dog brought peace to the children and their families began to share stories of his unexpected visit. Nurse Sadie, now a close friend of Mark and Rose, often told visitors and new staff members about the special dog who had arrived when Robin needed him most. Some spoke of Hero as though he had been a guardian angel, while others believed he was a magical presence sent to heal. Regardless of the explanation, everyone agreed on one thing. Hero had made a profound difference in their lives. The hospital staff, along with some of the families who had witnessed Hero's calming influence, created a small memorial in the hospital's pediatric ward. A plaque hung on the wall, engraved with Hero's name and the words, "In honor of the dog who brought peace, love, and comfort to those in need." Below the plaque, there was a picture of Hero, sitting by Robin's bed, watching over him with the same silent, unwavering devotion he had shown to every child he encountered. The memorial became a place of reflection for many. Parents who had lost children, patients who were facing their own battles with illness, and staff who had been touched by Hero's presence, all visited the small tribute to the dog who had transcended his simple role as a stray animal. For those who had been touched by Hero, the legend of the dog became more than just a story. It was a symbol of hope, of how unexpected sources of comfort could appear in the darkest of times. For Mark and Rose, the memorial became a place to visit whenever they needed to feel close to Robin again. They would often stand before the plaque, holding their new dog, Hero, and reflect on the time they had with the first Hero, the dog who had given them the courage to say goodbye and who had brought them peace in their darkest hour. They would whisper quiet words of gratitude, knowing that though their son was gone, his spirit lived on in the love they shared and the legacy Hero had left behind. One afternoon, as the sun began to set, Mark and Rose stood outside the hospital, holding the leash of their new dog, Hero. They looked back at the building, at the windows where Robin had spent his final days, and felt a bittersweet ache in their hearts. Robin was no longer there, but his memory and the lessons he had imparted upon them would never fade. As they walked away from the hospital, heading toward their car, Rose paused for a moment. She looked down at their new dog and smiled.
Hero,
She said softly,
you're carrying on Robin's spirit. We'll always remember the difference he made in our lives.
Mark nodded, his heart full.
And now, with this Hero, we can continue to heal. We're not moving on, but we're moving forward. Together.
Together they walked into the future, with Hero by their side, knowing that while the journey of grief was not over, it was now one they could face with love, hope, and the unexpected comfort that could come from even the smallest of miracles. The legacy of Hero, both the mysterious dog who had come to their side in Robin's final days and the new dog who would accompany them into the next chapter of their lives, was one of healing and love. It was a reminder that sometimes comfort comes in ways we least expect, and that the greatest gifts can come from the most unlikely sources. As Mark, Rose, and Hero made their way home, they knew that their hearts would forever be tied to Robin, but they also understood that life could continue, that healing was possible, and that in their own way they would honor their son's memory through the love they shared with each other and with Hero.